Okay, so the purpose of today's meeting is to go over some of our new safety rules for this lab. So this packet of information contains all that you need to know for the safety rules and access rules for this lab. And the reason that we're doing this sort of revamping is that the whole university is rethinking lab safety. And so there are a couple of new pages of information in this packet that you guys have never seen before. And so we'll go over those very carefully. The ones you have seen before we'll go over a little bit faster, and the ones that are sort of self-explanatory. So the packet is made up in this way. The very first page and the back of the first page are just sort of the general user rules and guidelines. And then if you want to learn more information about, for example, the emergency plan or the equipment training procedure or the personal protective equipment info, then you go to the sheets that are behind the first page for additional details. So we're going to walk through all 13 of these rules right now, and we will reference the supporting pages as needed. If you guys have any questions, please interrupt me. I'll make sure to repeat it for the camera so that future viewers know what we're talking about. Okay, so on page 1, the very first rule, actually the first 2 rules, are just sort of common sense. Be a good steward of the lab and of the resources that you have available to you. Don't remove tools or equipment. They have to be obviously kept in the lab so we can operate efficiently, and don't remove any supplies. So this is a lab that's joined with Patrick Fay's lab next door, and as such I have seen on occasion students coming from that side to over here and grabbing some supplies, and we're more than happy to share, but it's useful to know who's using the supplies for what projects. So if you see anyone doing that, it'd be great if you just tell us, and we can work out something with them. And likewise, no one should be taking supplies from Patrick Fay's lab and bringing them over here. Number 3 is you must read and understand the nanoelectronics lab emergency plan. So that's the third page of this packet. It's has a red header, and this is something new that was implemented again by Health and Safety here at Notre Dame. So they require that we have a plan so we all understand what we need to do in case of an emergency. And this information is also posted next to the door. In case of emergency, call 911 from a land phone. You should call 5555 from your cell phone. I'm pretty sure that in an emergency I might forget that I need to call a special number. So just please know that if you call 911 from your cell phone, they will eventually get the Notre Dame ambulance and fire here, but it just takes a little bit longer. So step 2, if it's the type of emergency where you need to evacuate, obviously get out of this room. If you want to grab the emergency information on the way out, rip it off the wall, whatever, make sure everyone's out. And then regardless of the type of emergency, step 3, we'd like you to call either Alan or myself or both of us after there's been some sort of emergency. We just want to know that it happened, right? We want to start communicating and make sure everyone's okay. And that speaks to number 4 too, which is send an emergency email to the SRB14 listserv. So after everything calms down a little bit, you can just get on your phone or iPad and shoot off an email to srb14@listserv.nd.edu. That will get the communication, will get sort of a virtual conversation going amongst all of us to make sure everyone's accounted for, everyone's aware of the emergency. This stems from one of their requirements, which was that we all have a meeting location. And that really works well in a 9-to-5 job where there's a lab where everyone's there during certain hours and we all meet in the parking lot. But as you guys know, you work crazy hours and you don't really know who's in here at any given moment. So if we could just get the conversation started via an email, that's how we're going to do it. In case of an evacuation, obviously, in that case, just exit the building. And then if someone could just shoot off an email to the listserv, that would be great. Again, we're just trying to communicate. So back to the first page. Number 4 is you must be properly trained or have prior approval from Alan or myself before using any of this equipment. So you can't just come in here and ask a grad student or a postdoc, hey, I want to make an IV measurement, can you show me how? You actually have to talk to Alan or I first. We will evaluate your need, then we'll put you in contact with the student who's responsible for training. The equipment training procedures outlined on the page after the emergency response in this sort of yellow color. I'm going to just let you read over that. The bolded sentence is that you are not authorized to use any of this equipment until you receive final approval from us. So what that means is very often we'll have a student or postdoc train you, but then Alan and I will come in, or I will come in and go over the equipment with you independently, making sure you sort of understand the ways it can break, the operating mechanism, just give you sort of a little bit of a test. And again, you can read through the rest of these details. We don't need to go over this now. Number 5 on the first page is also sort of be a good steward of your work environment. Just email us if you find anything's broken so we can get it fixed as quickly as possible and keep the lab up and running. If you discover we're short on any supplies, I don't want any gap in your performance and your progress because we're short on a solvent or something. Or if you observe someone not following these procedures, please feel free to talk to them directly, but if you don't feel comfortable, just let us know. And this isn't like you're going to get that person in trouble situation. We just want to talk to them very nicely about what's going on and make sure everyone's comfortable and happy working in this lab. Number 6 is new. It's the lab personnel personal protective equipment knowledge certification form. That's a mouthful. This is outlined on the brown header after the equipment procedure page. And the purpose of this particular information, it's a great idea. It's to let you know under what scenarios you need to wear specific pieces of personal protective equipment. And so that way it's not a guessing game for you guys, especially those who maybe aren't as used to working with chemicals. So the first 2 bolded notes are just, you have to wear closed-toed shoes to work in this lab, period, no matter whether you work with the chemicals or over here. That's pretty common stuff. And here we go again, you have to be properly trained. You can't just use the equipment. The first scenario is if you're using solvents, so just common solvents like ethanol, some alcohols, acetone, acetonitrile. The PPE that's required there is goggles, and they're in the drawers next to the fume hood. Gloves, and they either need to be latex or nitrile depending on the particular material that you're working with. In the case of these solvents, either one is fine. And the fume hood, you need to use all these solvents inside the fume hood. And you can read what the purpose is. It's pretty self-explanatory, to protect your eyes and hands and lungs. The second scenario is a little harsher. What if you're using acids or bases, so strong acids or bases? Again, you're required to wear all those things I just mentioned, and you also should wear a lab coat. And there's a lab coat that's in a size large that's hanging up to the right of the fume hood back there. We only have one in this lab because comparatively few people actually do any acid-based chemistry in here than other labs. But if you'd like to have your own lab coat, just let me know and I'll buy you one. So, the third scenario is filling the Cascade Pro Station Duo with liquid nitrogen, and right now this is primarily Sarah's area of expertise. You're going to want to wear your goggles and the lab coat to protect your arms, and you also want to wear insulated gloves, which should be in the drawer that's right next to Sarah. The next example is using a drill or soldering iron, so make sure you put goggles on so that nothing goes in your eyes. And for the females out there like myself, if you have long hair, just make sure you pull it back. Don't start using a drill with your hair flopping around. Turn to the other side of this PPE page, removing items from the hot plate or vacuum oven. This just talks about how you should wear gloves in sort of a warm temperature range, regular latex or nitrile, and then you should grab those insulated gloves. We have a pair back there for maybe temperatures above around 60 degrees C. Use common sense. For the glove box, you already know this because you've gone over this with Eric, but we don't want you to just stick your hands inside the glove box gloves. Number one, that's kind of gross because they don't get cleaned that often, right? So you're sticking your hands into a place where someone else has been sweating. The second reason is that it's possible someone else could have stuck contaminated gloves in there before you, which would be a big no-no, but could happen. So just protect your own hands before you stick them in the glove box. Every lab has their own rules on that. I've worked in a in a lab where there was no gloves inside the glove box and where this was their rule. You always put on latex or nitrile gloves. The last scenario is if you ever have to change the coolant on those Temptronic Thermochuck coolant units back there. And if you have to do that, you've probably talked to us before. Just throw on a pair of gloves and goggles to protect your hands and eyes. The last scenario I put on here because I wanted to make it clear that when you use the probe stations, you don't need any personal protective equipment. I didn't want anyone guessing about whether or not they needed to put on gloves. But if you're using any one of these 4 probe stations, you should be fine. So before we leave today, I have kind of a master list of this personal protective equipment form where I have all the signatures of the users of this lab. And so I'll need you to sign this before you leave here, stating that you understand what you should be wearing whenever you're doing these tasks. And if you guys think of any tasks that aren't on here, please tell me and I'll update this list. Okay, so back to page 1, we're on number 7. Don't bring any food or drink into this lab. So that's the basic rule. But if you look at the food and drink policy that Alan and I came up with, it deviates slightly from that rule in the sense that you're welcome to have a drink in your book bag or something that's here. We don't want you to go all day without drinking, but just grab it out of your book bag or take it off this shelf right here and just step outside and drink it, and then step back inside and put it away. So that way we don't have anyone openly eating or drinking in here, which obviously is a hazard to you, and then it's also a hazard potentially your samples if you were to contaminate them with the sandwich. And so in that way you kind of get to have your liquids around you, but we're also being safe about it. And if you see anyone in here eating or drinking, just mention it to them that they need to go outside. And if you don't feel comfortable, let us know. So number 8, you must know the location and understand the operation of the 2 eye washes, the safety shower, and the spill kit. So since I'm being filmed, I won't run around the room. But we have 2 eye washes in this lab. One of them's right there to the right of the door, and one of them is back attached to the sink in the same location as your sprayer is on your sink, and it operates in basically the same way. So the eye washes, if you pull that out, and Eric can go ahead and pull the eye wash out, you'll see that water will immediately begin flowing. And you'll notice, go ahead, you can shut it. Thank you. You'll notice there's a yellow card above the eye wash, and it just lists the months of the year. We're supposed to flush that eye wash out every month for about a minute. And the reason for that is obvious. If you had a true emergency, you would not want to go to that eye wash for which water and bacteria has been growing in the water for a while, right? So if you think about it, you're standing here talking, pull that sucker down, and initial the yellow sheet of paper, and then Alan and I will check on it periodically. What you don't want to do is pull the safety shower lever. It's not like it pulls out something else that you can look at like the eye wash. It will immediately start dumping gallons of water on you. So only pull that down in the case that you actually need to use the safety shower. So we're not flushing that out, okay? So we're only using it in the case of emergency. The spill kit is a new addition to our lab. It's actually in the back right corner, and it's a giant yellow box with huge font that says spill kit. So I put it back there because that's where all the solvents are kept. And my estimation is maybe the worst spill we could possibly have in here is maybe a 4-liter jug breaks or something. You really need to be familiar with the MSDS sheets of what you're using to understand if you should clean that up or not, right? So let's say it's an alcohol. Okay, that seems legitimate and safe. You can go ahead and open the spill kit and use the absorbent material and clean up ethanol, right? Let's say it's acetonitrile. That would be a bad idea. So if you had a catastrophic spill of acetonitrile, my recommendation is you tell the people in the room, you guys leave and call 911, because we really want them coming to clean up that sort of more toxic solvent. We don't want you inhaling it. And in fact, there's a pretty tragic story of that happening to a girl in a lab at a university. The same quantity I just described of acetonitrile spilled on the floor. She tried to clean it up. She became overcome, fell into it, and they found her the next morning. So you have to know what you're working with, and don't be afraid to call us. It's okay if you break something or make a mistake or whatever. Just give us a call, please, and we'll say, no, don't clean that up, or yeah, go ahead, or we'll show up. Alan lives right across the street. So when in doubt, just get out and ask someone or call emergency. So the spill kit's pretty self-explanatory. It has a bunch of absorbent materials in it, and it has an extra pair of gloves and some goggles, and you're welcome to also grab it if you need to take it to another lab. If there's a spill, just let us know so I can restock it. So number 9 is don't bring new chemicals into the lab without talking to me first. So just email me, explain what your need is, and then we'll go from there. Number 10 addresses that specifically. If you receive approval from me to bring in a new chemical, you need to print out the MSDS and understand it, and then add it to the 3-ring binder on the back right. You can see it from here on the shelf. That's our 3-ring binder of all the MSDSs for all the chemicals in this lab. And so once you've done that, send me an email confirming that it is actually in there. Number 11 is something new, and Eric Kinder worked on this, and it's a very nice setup. So all chemicals, even maybe chemicals that you've had my permission to bring in before, need to be logged in our online chemical inventory system. So this is dead easy to use. You go to the Nanoelectronics website under Facilities, you click on this link called Chemical Inventory Form. It pulls up this form that Eric created. It's self-explanatory, right? Quantity, the name of the chemical, so on and so forth, when you're bringing it in, have you put the MSDS in the 3-ring binder. And then that automatically adds it to our log of chemicals and the quantity of the chemicals in this lab. The reason for that is that Health and Safety wants to know, rightly so, how much we have in here. Are we exceeding the maximum amount of solvents that we should have in a particular volume, for example? Or do we have something particularly dangerous in this lab that first responders should know about? So it's a great idea, and I really appreciate Eric's help on it. You can also go to that same website and click on Chemical Inventory Log, and it will open up an Excel spreadsheet that you cannot edit, but it'll show you all the chemicals, and that's kind of nice too, because say you wonder if we have a chemical in this lab, that will answer the question for you instantly. And Eric and I will make sure to double check that log, say semi-annually when we do our lab cleanings. That seems like a good time. Number 12 is just reiterating, you really need to understand, just take the time to read the MSDSs. I was a grad student not long ago. I know that all these little things add up, but that's a really important one that you should do. And it's something easy you can do, while you're eating lunch or something. You can carefully read through the chemicals that you're working with. So one great example of that is the solvent we commonly use for these polymer electrolytes, acetonitrile. If you heat it to a high enough temperature, it will break down into cyanide. I can't imagine what could get much more dangerous than that, right? So you have to know that you have to work with it in the fume hood. You have to know the temperature at which that happens, and under what circumstances would you ever exceed that temperature, right? So these are the things that you should know about from the MSDS. And number 13 just goes back to make sure that you understand the emergency information to the right of the door. So what should you do in a case of emergency? And then Alan, Heidi, and Barb, they figured out that in case you need some sort of medical attention, where you should go. So as a student, you need to go someplace different than if you're a postdoc or a faculty member, and that information will lead you in the right direction. The last sheet on this packet is actually, I made it just to kind of help Alan and I, but I thought you might like to see it too. It has the black header, and it's just a user access and training checklist. So you can see we often have a lot of new people in this lab, and so for Alan and I, it's kind of nice to just have a list of things that we've gone over with each user to make sure that they understand the rules. And so I thought that you might like to see that as well. So does anyone have any questions? Okay, so before you guys leave, I need your signature on this form, and then we'll be good to go. So thanks for coming.